Well, if you guys have watched me for a considerable amount of time, you may have remembered that I did the top 10 greatest Thanksgiving movies and specials. And still, I say that a lot of that list I still hold to this day. However, within the couple of years that I have made that video, I came across another movie that probably should have been on that list. And yes, it was directed by John Hughes, and no, it doesn't even mention the word Thanksgiving. Confusing? Yeah, I know. And that movie is Uncle Buck. Now, many of you probably don't really know what this movie is about because it's not really John Hughes' best works or most well-known work, but I will say it is one of his lost gems, his underrated works, if you will. Sort of like She's Having a Baby or Real Genius, if you will. The main plot is that there's a family, and the mother's father is getting fairly ill. So they have to leave in the middle of the night, and they have to have the father's brother, Buck, played by John Candy, look after the kids. An angry teenage daughter named Tia, and two cutesy little twins named Maisie and Miles, played by Macaulay Culkin. And the most hilarity of ensues. Now, on the surface, it may seem like this isn't the best thing ever, and, well, I will say that it isn't. It's just something about the chemistry between all the characters and the writing and pretty much how this movie's structured is just gives you all the warm, fuzzy feelies. I mean, John Candy obviously is the best part of this whole movie. He just gives the greatest performance any of these people can give, honestly. He pours his heart and soul into the comedy, and it shows. And while it's not one of his best roles he's ever been in, he does play an exceptional amount of job. Also, if you missed the intro there, Macaulay Culkin is in this thing. I had absolutely no idea that Macaulay Culkin was in this movie. And this was before Home Alone fame. And like most John Hughes movies, most of the characters act like real people. And part of that is because John Hughes doesn't shy away from some of the most boring aspects of people's lives. Like, for instance, the movie actually shows the parents debating about who's going to take care of the kids. And they don't do like a cutesy little thing where they're like, oh, goodbye, children, you're so beautiful, I don't want to leave you. No, they leave in the dead of night. That's a neat little Easter egg, I guess, that kind of helped the movie in more of a realistic terms, if you will. And speaking of the realism, the entire set design is absolutely glorious. Now, I probably didn't tell you this, but I lived in the Midwest quite a long time, especially when I was growing up as a little kid. And I'll tell you, our house pretty much looked exactly like this, with all the toys scattered all over the place and little knickknacks and what have you, all over the place scattered around. I don't know, it's just the little touches like that that are just absolutely beautiful. Now, speaking of the realism, let's talk about the humor. The humor isn't realistic whatsoever. In fact, it's more like the Looney Tunes type of thing, like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles or whatever. Where that type of, like, humor, I guess, like slapstick and what have you, wouldn't really work in a realistic setting. But for some reason, it kind of works here. Like, for instance, when Uncle Buck is trying to bust the boyfriend of the Tia girl. It is so over the top and so dramatized that it's kind of hilarious. Also, when Uncle Buck is punching the clown, it's absolutely hilarious. And even though he would probably go to jail for like most of the stuff he does, once you know the context of how the humor is supposed to play out, it's really quite enjoyable. I mean, to me, it's kind of like Indiana Jones. We want to be Indiana Jones, but if we were Indiana Jones, we'd probably be dead. Or even James Bond. We want to be James Bond. We want to have women all over us and fighting people with all these gadgets and spies and what have you. But if we were like James Bond, we'd probably be bored out of our minds, or we'd probably be dead. The same goes with here. We want to be Uncle Buck, but if we were, we'd probably be in jail. Speaking of which, the jokes. Now, The jokes as written on paper are pretty bad, but the only reason why they work is mostly because of the characters and the actors. Without the top level acting by pretty much every character in this movie, the jokes don't really work. They kind of fall flat. And that's kind of where the faults start to show with this movie, in that, well, half the writing is pretty good and it's really good setup and all that. You can kind of tell, like, John Hughes kind of wrote this in over like a weekend, which he did with most of his scripts, because there are setup and lines that are just kind of stupid and don't work unless you had some really credible actors to pull it off, which he did, but you can still tell that the writing's not really up to par all that much. And also, speaking of which, I don't pretend to say that this is one of John Hughes' best works, because by far it's not. It's a very generic piece of film. I mean, we've seen this setup done half to death. It's been done in Mary Poppins even. Also, Tia, the bratty teenage girl, she is way, way too cruel. It almost seems like she relishes in cruelty and evil. She's evil to everybody. And yeah, she's going through puberty, and yeah, I mean, a lot of girls go through it like that, but I don't think that women are that cruel when they're growing up. However, there's still a lot of stuff that is great in this movie. In fact, it almost reminds me of like a Coen Brothers movie where the side characters are more interesting than the main characters. I mean, first and foremost, let's talk about Pal. Pal is awesome. I remember watching him as a little kid, but I don't remember where it was until I watched this movie. Then all of a sudden, these nostalgia feelings just came over me. It was like, oh my gosh, that's Pal. Pal is amazing. Even though he's supposed to be like this douche, like this sly guy that's like trying to get laid or whatever, he's absolutely hilarious. I have no idea why. He just comes in and then goes out. It's not even that big of a scene, but it's just so memorable and just so hilarious. Also, Denise is a very good character too. She plays a supporting actress or whatever that's, I don't know, it's kind of paint by the numbers. Not really that memorable, but still, she plays her part to the best of her ability and she does a very good job. Overall, this movie is very, very good, but it doesn't pertain anything to Thanksgiving. Why do I think of this movie as a Thanksgiving movie? The only holiday they really celebrate at all is like Macaulay Culkin's birthday, and I wouldn't think that anyone would celebrate it besides, well, Macaulay Culkin. And here is the reason why. Wholesomeness. This movie isn't about turkey or stuffing or pilgrims or what have you. It's not about the commercialism of Thanksgiving. It's about what Thanksgiving really is all about, and that is family. Uncle Buck is the relative that comes over that no one really wants him to be there, but yet he comes anyway out of obligation. It's just within this movie, the uncle that no one really wants to be there turns into the uncle that everyone wants to be there. And I don't know, that's kind of inspiring, and it's kind of nice. Also, it's shot in the Midwest's, like, winter, which is absolutely cold, and it kind of reminds you of Thanksgiving. And it wasn't out of pure coincidence. They wanted it to be in the cold. This movie could have been shot any time in any place. They were supposed to be shot in St. Louis, but apparently St. Louis had like a warm stroke, I guess. And John Hughes really wanted to get that winter aesthetic to it, or that fall aesthetic into his movie. So it was a very conscious choice. And yeah, I discovered this movie last year with Thanksgiving, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And now I'm making a tradition to watch this movie every Thanksgiving. Why? Because of family. Because of the aesthetic, and because this movie is just downright great. Even though they never even mentioned the word Thanksgiving, this is truly a pure Thanksgiving movie if I ever saw one. Because it's not about turkey or stuffing or anything marketable around Thanksgiving. It's about family. It's about the thing that Thanksgiving is really all about. And I'm going to give this movie a great. This is a great movie that you should watch every Thanksgiving. Even though it has probably absolutely nothing to do with Thanksgiving, it has everything to do with Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.